Hey folks, Mike here from ZFG. Thanks for tuning in. I want to kick off today's discussion and talk about belt drives versus chain drives, some of the pros and cons on both, why I have a preference for belt drives as well, and go through some scenarios, I guess. I want to present the information in a non-biased way. So I know there's a lot of chain drive fanboys out there. I don't want to upset any of you folks, but at the same time, I just want to put some food for thought for any newbies coming into the e-skate scene that are tossing up between going chain or belt, and have a view at some of the pros and cons of each of the setups. So I'll go through in point form some of the topics I'm going to talk about to start off with. We'll look at hot swapping scenarios, the key differences between hot swapping from street wheels to off-road wheels, some of the pros and cons from belts and chains. We'll talk about some of the differences in weight. You know, rotating mass has an impact. Obviously, belts are going to be lighter than chains, and does it have an impact? And we'll look at some scenarios in other spaces where, you know, motorbikes that are running lighter belts have a twitchier throttle than motorbikes that are running heavy-duty. Motorbikes that are running heavy-duty chains. Swapping them out to lighter chains, how they're twitchier on the throttle, right? So would that have, is it a relatable scenario to chains and belts in the e-skate world? Discussion about mud and different riding conditions, pros and cons of each. We'll look at life expectancy of both, and what I'm going to call a monkey do scenario. So there's some of the key topics. I'm going to split the video up into each of those key topics to make it more palatable and easy to view. So again, thanks for tuning in. That's the agenda. Now, one benefit chains have over belts is their ability to ride better in muddy conditions. With chains, mud doesn't build up in between the grooves, and because it's metal, it just flicks it right out, right? So by all means, chains definitely have that over belts. Although I've ridden my board through some heavy mud, and it's not fun, right? It's almost the equivalent of me taking my jet ski out to nice flat open water. You know, you ride for 15-20 minutes, you look around and you're like, all right, now what do I do? There's only so much fun you can have riding around with 8-inch wheels in thick, gloopy mud. It's not an enjoyable experience. Some people do love it, and if you do, that's great. It's not for me. So that being the case, I can't justify putting chains on my board for that reason. So yeah, so that's another reason why. Also, they're loud, significantly louder than belt drives. So much so that on the builds that I have built with chains, I don't need to carry a bell around to warn pedestrians of coming up behind them, because they can actually hear me from a mile away. So if you're one of those folks that enjoys going for a nice Sunday cruise, and you want to be at one with your thoughts, chains is not gonna cut it, right? It's unbelievably loud, exceedingly loud, louder than belts. So yeah, that's another reason why, I guess. So when going down the route of choosing belts versus chains, for me, one of the most critical components was being able to quickly swap out from a street build carver scenario to an off-road build where I have nice grippy tires and I can head out to a skate park or a dirt track and rip it up. So I noticed with chain drives, one of the things when swapping your wheels out is that in undoing and taking off the wheel, the chain itself, it's locked in place, right? So in order for you to take that wheel off, you have to stretch the chain a little bit. And over time, it's not going to do great for the chain. And for me, in my scenario, I knew that sooner or later, and sooner most probably, that chain was going to snap just because of the way I ride and because of the frequency in which I change my wheels. So with a belt, because there's no lip, there's no sprocket, it slides off nice and easy. I can swap that wheel out, put the new one back on, and we'll put that back on. You know, you practice this and you can do it so quickly, right? But when the camera is rolling, the pressure's on. And what we have here is when putting the wheel back on, you want to put the belt on. Now, this is the point where if you're swapping out a chain drive system, this is where you're going to stretch the chain again, putting the wheel back on. But with a belt, it does stretch, although it does have a greater tolerance. So with a belt, you hold it in place, keep your fingers on the spot and turn. And you'll see that it'll just stretch. You know, it's going to prove me wrong again because that's what it always does. And we have, there we go. There it is there. So we've put the wheel on, swapped it out and put the belt drive on. And it's fairly straightforward. You know, a lot of people say belts snap more frequent than chains, and they do. Although carrying a spare belt takes up almost no space. You can put it in your back pocket, and if you're going out on a group ride, you're always going to want to at least carry a belt and a spare tube in case you get a flat as well. So swapping out a belt, it's easy as. I've never had the opportunity to swap out a chain. Maybe some people want to tell me how easy it is, if they found that easy, or if it's difficult to swap out a chain. Although having a belt system, multiple tire setups, where I can just slide one tire setup, slide the next tire setup, and swap out from high speed on concrete versus low speed dirt track jumping. It suits my purpose, right? So yeah, the main takeaway here is that the efficiency of a belt drive, in that you can slide on and slide off different setups quickly. You can replace belts quickly as well if and when they do snap. So, and that's easy. Again, we can take that tire off. And we'll put the new one on. Like so. Again. Real easy, right? Chain, it's a little bit more complicated, and you are going to stretch that chain. Every time you take that tire off and to put that tire back on, that chain is going to have some tension added to it, and it's something I'm not particularly a fan of. You know, when we look at the way that a dirt bike chain and sprocket setup is designed in that there is no chain stretch when you're swapping out a wheel or a tyre and you need to take the whole rim out. And that's because you undo the nuts on the opposite side, and that allows you to take out the axle from the inside hub, and you can also undo this guy right here, which is the rear tyre adjustment. And what that means is that you can move the entire wheel forward, the chain slacks off completely, take the wheel off, do whatever repair you need to do to it, swap it out for a road tyre, or swap out for some new threads, grave digger threads, and put the rim on with the chain nice and loose, and sliding your axle, and then adjust it using the rear wheel adjuster. So at no point in time is this chain going to be under tension when you're sliding it on and off, unlike if you had a chain setup on an electric mountain board. So monkey see, monkey do. I've been in sales professionally for quite a long time, and one of the first things I learned is study what the pros are doing and copy them. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. And when I first got into mountain boarding, the first thing I did was I googled electric off-road mountain boarding, and Tramper was one of the first sites I got to, and there were a lot of key elements that I picked up from those pro Tramper riders that I wanted to replicate. And I would sit there, watch their videos, zoom in, pause at different scenarios, because I wanted to inspect what their builds looked like. And one thing that was common across all their builds was obviously top mounted battery boxes for one, channel trucks was another, and belts. None of them were using chains. And I did find that unusual, because Tramper also have an option to spec out their builds using a chain drive as opposed to a belt drive. But all their pro riders use belts. They don't even use gear drives, and I found that amazing. And I thought, why would that be the case? And maybe it's because they're lighter, maybe it's because they're easily serviceable. Also the type of riding these folks are doing, they're not riding through heavy mud. They're at skate parks, terrorizing open space areas, jumping off stairs, doing all sorts of shenanigans. So that was the style of riding that I wanted to get into. And if it was good enough for the Tramper riders to have belts on their boards, then it's good enough for me to replicate that scenario as well. Alright, so another monkey see, monkey do scenario is looking at what other top electric skateboard manufacturers are doing in terms of when they release their boards. And I think you'll be hard pressed to find any that are releasing large quantity of boards that are being shipped to the Joes and Joettes of the world that have chain drives. The large 99% of the majority of store boards coming out on the market are all either direct hub drive or belt drive. There's obviously a reason why that's the case. I personally think that from a serviceability and maintainability perspective, it's much more friendlier to the common person to be able to swap in and swap out belts when they break, and maintain a belt system as opposed to a chain system. Even though chain is cheaper, right? That is a known fact. It's a relatively cheap setup. You can get cheap components online. Although from a user engagement perspective, it's not as intuitive as setting up a belt system. Possibly one of the reasons why. There are other reasons, don't know. Give me some comments, food for thought, right? But if there's a large quantity of top brand manufacturers releasing boards in a specific configuration, it's got to say something. So again, monkey see, monkey do. If it's good enough for them and it's good enough for the general public and it serves the masses and it's a system that works, then I'm going to replicate that system on my builds, and that's why I predominantly choose belt drives over chain drives. So yeah.